Governor, since we've been on the air tonight, a story has broken in the New York Times, and it has broken since I have been on the air, and so I'm not fully read in on this, but I know that you've at least seen the headline, and I want to ask you just for your reaction to this. It's a pretty shocking story. The headline is Musk, meaning Elon Musk, set to get access to top secret U.S. plan for potential war with China. The lead is this. The Pentagon is scheduled tomorrow, Friday, to brief Elon Musk on the U.S. military's plan for any war that might break out with China. One official confirming to the Times that Musk is to be at the Pentagon on Friday, but offering no details. Mr. Musk, of course, has extensive financial interests in China, and so this, I think, is raising lots of alarm bells for a lot of different people. The Pentagon's war plans, known in military jargon as O plans or operational plans, are among the military's most closely guarded secrets. If a foreign country was to learn how the U.S. planned to fight a war against them, it could reinforce its defenses and address its weaknesses, making the plans far less likely to succeed. The top secret briefing for the China war plan has 20 to 30 slides that lay out how the U.S. would fight such a conflict. It covers various options on what Chinese targets the U.S. could hit over what time period. And these would be the options that would be presented to Mr. Trump for decisions. For some reason, they've decided to show Elon Musk this level of detail about a potential war with China while he operates the largest car factory, I believe, in China, and has immense financial interest in that country and contacts with that country's government that he has not disclosed to the U.S. as part of maintaining his security clearance. I just got to get your reaction to that, sir.
Well, speechless would be the word. I don't know how to convey. I don't possess the language ability to convey how far out of the norm this is. Like nothing that people listening, like, look, this is those of us who served, the background checks from the FBI, just to receive clearance as an artillery enlisted soldier was extensive to get that background. And then the level of information that you can get, or as a member of Congress, to be able to have access to this type of information. These are closely guarded secrets because our national and our global defense depends upon them. And once again, we have this, I don't know, the character, the world's richest man with the world's most fragile ego. And I don't understand where the Republicans, where are Lindsey Grahams, where are these people who know how this works to not be terrified of where this is at? And again, seeing the Commerce Secretary today tell people to go buy a specific stock, in not jesting, not in that. And look, I have to be very careful because I'll be candid, I think this guy is deeply damaged, a buffoon, but I also don't want to elevate him. He is unelected. He does not know how this stuff works. And Donald Trump is being reckless with the most sensitive data. So I want to try and provide some assurance to the American people. But I also think our leadership needs to be very clear about not sugarcoating this. And Donald Trump obviously disrespects the American public. He thinks they're not smart enough to understand this and doesn't care. I do believe the American public knows. And I do believe when they see stories like this, that this is why these town halls are growing so big. This is why folks are starting to question. And what I truly worry that I get sucked into, too, is they throw so much at it. This is the stuff that you should watch. This is the disappearing people, sharing our most guarded secrets on global conflict with a truly unstable private citizen who has no authority and appears to not care. So, yeah, I would just say this is chilling. I'm hoping that the resistance, and right now the resistance has to be in the Senate. Republican senators need to put a stop to this and pull this back.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, sir, thank you for making time to be here tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
And here is America right now. The Democrats' more outspoken leaders, Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, leading a Nevada rally today dubbed Fighting the Oligarchy, pushing a more aggressive approach to the other side of America. You also see on your screen President Trump promoting an executive action rather than working with Congress on passing actual legislation or long-term policy. He claims that what you see him signing there will start a process to close the education department. We have More on that coming up. But the rally, as you can see in the line here, drew over 50,000 RSVPs, the Democratic rally, per organizers. Here's more of that line.
We're all here together because we share in the frustration and the heartache that comes from watching those in power actively tear down or refuse to fight for everyday working Americans like us. And we are here together because an extreme concentration of power and corruption is taking over this country like never before. But we are also here today because we know that a better world is possible.
This country faces enormous crises, and how we respond to these crises today will impact not only our lives, but the lives of our kids, future generations, and in terms of climate change, the very well-being of the planet.
We are witnessing an oligarchy in America. And that is when those with the most economic, political, and technological power destroy the public good to enrich themselves while millions of Americans pay the price.
Today, we are here to say very loudly and clearly, no, we will not accept an oligarchic form of society where a handful of billionaires run the government. No, we will not accept an authoritarian form of society with a president who undermines the Constitution every day,
lying to and screwing over working people so that they can steal from our health care and Social Security and veterans care to pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest and bailouts for their crypto billionaire friends. There's a word for this: corruption.
No, we will not accept a society of massive economic inequalities where the very rich are becoming much richer while working families across the country struggle to put food on the table.
This isn't just about Republicans. We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us too. Community is the most powerful building block we have to defeat authoritarianism and root out the corruption in the White House.
Let's do something really radical. You ready? Let's tell the truth.
Tell the truth. That is some of what we heard today, and you can see at the rather large gathering, there was enthusiasm even amidst what has been a depressing period for many on the Democratic left and the opposition party. These are leaders associated with the more progressive wing. That's one dimension, but they also, separate from, say, ideology or how to regulate capitalism, these are two leaders who want to confront Trump in a way that's more assertive than many other figures like Senators Schumer or Durbin.
We are living in a dangerous and unprecedented moment in American history.
I don't think we're witnessing the start of an oligarchy. I think we are fully here.
These billionaires are not looking out for us. They are grinding us to a pulp, and they are eating us for breakfast.
If you are a fan of Donald Trump and you like to punish yourself by watching my live streams, welcome. I'm still fighting for your health care anyway.
We've got to be smart, we've got to be organized, and we've got to fight back. This is not a time for wallowing in despair and hiding under the covers. The stakes are just too high.
The stakes are high, and we are showing you there how both of those two individuals who are separated by many decades in age have been doing something that Trump and MAGA leaders have used in communications technology, which is part of how we live politics today. They're using those online tools to speak directly. Sanders there citing a more upbeat, energetic approach. And then there are sneakers. Donald Trump has tapped into all kinds of trends, sometimes nonsensically, but Democrats like AOC and Sanders are increasingly aware that you still have to find ways to connect with people's passions, even show that you can have some fun, that's part of what I just showed you online today and cultural politics today. And the sneakers are in the news. Bernie Sanders has actually led on that authentically with his own style and campaigning, the online communication, and then out in the real world, what you see here is Sanders pulling up, as they say, to a sneaker drop in Vermont, a gathering that brings people together well beyond politics. It's more popular among many young people. And Sanders was game, but also you'll notice he was himself, marveling at the high cost of some sneakers.
Tell me, what is the story with these kids? They're very nice sneakers, but they're more than I would pay. How much do these things cost?
$225 for sneakers? Now, this, by the way, is when real Bernie almost melts into the Larry David Bernie parody, so memorably done on Saturday Night Live. They're nice, but it's more than I would pay. We hear you, Bernie. And Bernie is in the news because he is out there fighting the fight, teaming up with AOC, trying online tools, going to sneaker drops, while also making the serious arguments for universal health care and against capitalist insurance companies and against a lot of Trump and Musk's attempt to break down the federal government as we know it. Democrats are clearly seeking a strong and authentic way to confront the Trump agenda in this sequel that looks at times so much more extreme than the first term. And then we see the headlines about who is going to lead the Democratic Party while its approval sinks to a 30-year low. Well, this rally is just one thing, but it is one thing more than sitting around D.C. doing the same old debates or using the same old communications tools or only going out into the field close to the elections, which is something that Howard Dean and others have mentioned on this broadcast and other places that the Democrats have struggled with historically. Meanwhile, some Republicans don't want to be out in the field answering for the Trump-Musk agenda. I mentioned Trump is attacking the education department. He has this executive order. I'll just remind you, although that's in the news, only Congress may legally abolish that agency. And if Trump got any further with what looked mostly like a PR effort, well, it's not like Republicans want to sell that in the next election. By huge margins, 2 in 3 Americans just oppose eliminating the education department. And out in the field, as I mentioned, that's kind of the theme here today, Republicans are getting an earful from voters in red districts opposing a lot of the Trump-Musk agenda.
Social Security. The work that I have specifically been doing, I am on the judiciary. It's so bizarre to me how obsessed you are with federal government. But here's the thing.
That's some of the back and forth, and you can see in a kind of a less, perhaps, aggressive manner the Republican trolling that passes for argument these days. Telling citizens, your constituents, that they seem, quote, obsessed with the federal government, like it's some sort of Twitter or X fight where you can dunk on them, isn't a good explanation of just how large or small you want the federal government to be and whether people still want Social Security checks on time or an education department, as I just showed you, that most people in places red and blue think has a role to play. And that's just when Republicans are there. That's when the officials actually go out in the field. When they don't, well, voters are trying to draw attention to that. Here's a Colorado activist showing a kind of a cardboard cutout of a very conservative Congresswoman, Lauren, who hasn't held town halls, so she hasn't been held accountable in that way. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is trumping, saying America has become something of a, quote, fat, dumb, foolish country in a Fox interview. a kind of rhetoric that is striking because it doesn't seem very appealing. It violates many laws of politics, but here we are. So you take it all together today, and you can see that what the politicians are trying to do in Washington is only one part of the story. Because out in the country they're supposed to represent, out in the districts they're supposed to represent, there is a broad and diverse set of views. It does not mean the Democratic Party is a popular alternative right now. It's actually, as I showed you, crashing. Just like the stocks under Donald Trump's leadership and a lot of the approval of Donald Trump, his economic agenda, his plans to shutter the education department. We had an election, but it doesn't seem to have resolved the deeper questions about what it means for working people in this environment with all of these wealthy people and all of the tariffs and all of the market gyrations and the talk of cutting the federal government and maybe going after Social Security, as Elon Musk has promised, all of that affecting real people's lives. The anger is actually building. So we're going to bring in Sherrod Brown, longtime populist senator, and Reverend Al Sharpton for where we go from here.
And that is the kind of dictatorial power that's driving people to the streets. It's bringing new acts of defiance and more ordinary Americans saying no every day. Right now, the focal point for that energy is Las Vegas, where tonight Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez joined local Democrats for a rally that garnered so much interest from so many people, they had to move the whole thing to a larger venue.
We are here to say very loudly and clearly, no, we will not accept an oligarchic form of society where a handful of billionaires run the government.
I know what it feels like to feel left behind. And I know that we don't have to live like this anymore, Las Vegas. We deserve better than this, Las Vegas. And despite the chaos that surrounds us at the moment, I want you to know that we are closer to that world than we think. This isn't just about Republicans. We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us, too.
Scenes like that are replicating themselves all over the country. Every day, Americans on the streets showing up in force at federal buildings and state capitals to protest Trump's lawless slashing of government services. People are gathering at Tesla dealerships to protest Trump's unelected co-president Elon Musk and his efforts to take your federal benefits. Most of all, regular citizens are confronting their members of Congress. Like in the state of Wyoming, a state that Trump won last year with nearly 3/4 of all the votes cast. But the state's sole member of Congress, Republican Harriet Hageman, faced an incredibly frustrated crowd.
This person would like to know how I am going to help protect the rights of trans and non-binary people. I don't even know what that means. Yes, I know what DOJ is doing, and no, I'm not scared. Next question. Right here. Here's the only thing that DOJ has done, which is it's so bizarre to me how obsessed you are with federal government. But here's the thing.
She is the sole congresswoman from the state who represents them in the federal government. So that's a little bit of a weird thing to say, particularly standing in the town, of course, where Matthew Shepard was murdered for being gay, vis-a-vis that first question. Confrontations like that are why party leadership has told House Republicans to avoid town hall meetings with voters altogether, just ignore them. And as a result, activists in multiple states like North Carolina and Maine and Pennsylvania and Arkansas held town halls, invited their House and Senate Republicans who no-showed, but the town halls went on anyway. In central Pennsylvania, constituents of Republican Scott Perry blasted him for his absence, shared their own frustrations like this woman who says her son was fired unjustly from his federal job.
For the Department of Education, he got axed. Opened up the computer, guess what? You're gone. Let me tell you what he did for the Department of Education. He reviewed contracts. He saved everybody in here thousands of tax dollars, and his evaluation was the top. Then I turn on the TV the next day, and there is Trump saying they were scum, no good people, what they got rid of. I am furious. Furious. Where is Scott Perry? Where's 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 Scott Perry?
As Republicans are avoiding their own voters at all costs, it looks like Democrats might actually be capitalizing on the vacuum left for them. We've got, of course, Sanders and AOC attracting thousands across the country. Then there's Minnesota Governor Tim Walz going on his own speaking and listening tour.
To be with our grandkids. We'd like to do this. We know this on the iPhone. They've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping. So, and if you own one, we're not blaming you. You can take dental floss and pull the Tesla thing off, and take out, just telling you.
Democrats, too, are finding that when they show up for town halls, they're taking a punishing amount of rage from their constituents, too, for not doing enough. Much of that anger stems from the decision last week by Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer and 9 other Senate Democrats to pass Trump's funding bill and avert a government shutdown. Colorado Senator Michael Bennet was not one of them, and last night he suggested it might be time for new Democratic leadership.
I do think on the leadership question, it's always better to, examine whether folks are in the right place, and we're certainly going to have that conversation. It's important for people to know, when it's time to go.
There are a lot of people out there who are starving for real resistance, so much so that even the normally quite moderate, reserved Delaware Senator Chris Coons drew a line in the sand in his virtual town hall.
Look, we need your voices. We need your engagement. We need your support. And bluntly, if President Trump takes the next step and just blatantly ignores the orders of the court, we're going to need folks to come out to the streets.
It's impossible to deny what millions upon millions of Americans run right now, right? A hardened opposition against the Trump takeover unfurling day by day. And for all the feelings you may have gone through in recent weeks, there's no real resistance to Trump. There's no real hope. The vibes are shifting. They really are. People are speaking up and standing up. You are not alone. There's a movement afoot to save democracy, and it is rapidly gaining steam.
On Monday this week, President Donald Trump went to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., where he has recently fired the entire board and appointed himself as the new chairman. While skulking around that national cultural treasure on Monday, where he now personally intends to choose awardees. So get ready for a lot of, Kid Rock and children's choirs who sing songs about the greatness of Donald Trump. While he was skulking around the halls of the Kennedy Center on Monday, President Trump on Monday announced, surprise, that the very next day he would be releasing all files related to the investigation of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. All files on this subject with no redactions would be released the next day, on Tuesday. And so, because he said so, and what else is government other than just whatever Donald Trump says, because he said so, the National Archives on Tuesday, in fact, posted online over 60,000 pages of government documents on this subject. So he says it on Monday. They posted this stuff on Tuesday. Now, it's Friday Eve now, right? It's Thursday night. For all the conspiracy theories and drama that we as a country have built up around the JFK assassination in the past 60-plus years, ask yourself this. Over the last couple of days, have you, heard anything in the news? Have you seen any big headlines about the amazing revelations in these documents? Have you seen news stories about how, wow, these new documents finally shed new light on the assassination, or that, some previously unknown fact about it has been revealed and this changes everything? Have you seen any news stories like that? No, you have not. And that is because the documents that genius Donald Trump insisted on Monday had to be released on Tuesday, those documents were almost entirely documents that had been previously released to the public under President Joe Biden when he released a bunch of them, under other presidents who had released other stuff. Almost all of this stuff had previously been released anyway. But this was a little different, right? Because Donald Trump, genius, insisted that the documents he was ordering to be released, these documents would have to be unredacted. He made that explicit in his order. Totally unredacted, nothing crossed out. And so, on his orders, they released all of these documents that had been previously released, except this time they had nothing crossed out, nothing redacted. And it turns out, you know what had been redacted the other times they had released these documents? You know what had been under those black boxes in previous releases of these same documents? You know what was under the Sharpie scratch-outs on all these pages? Turns out what had been redacted was the Social Security numbers and birth dates of tons and tons of random people who worked for the government around the time that the Kennedy assassination was being investigated. Ta-da! So that is what he has ordered released. That's the big revelation from Donald Trump. Headline: White House seeks to contain damage from personal data in Kennedy files. Headline: Social Security numbers and other private information unmasked in JFK files. These geniuses, these big brains. Among the people who Donald Trump has just doxed by publishing his full and unredacted Social Security number for no reason at all is his own lawyer, Joe diGenova, who worked for the Trump campaign and who represented Trump on some of the weirdest Russia and Ukraine stuff. In the Washington Post, quote, former Trump campaign lawyer Joseph diGenova, age 80, whose private information was included in the release, said, quote, it's absolutely outrageous. It's sloppy. Unprofessional. diGenova continued, quote, it's like a first grade elementary level rule of security to redact things like that. First time in my life I've ever knowingly agreed with Joseph diGenova. But that's just the start. The Washington Post further discovered that Donald Trump, in his infinite wisdom, has just published the full, accurate, and complete, quote, Social Security numbers, birthplaces, and birth dates of not just random people, including his own lawyer, but, quote, more than 100 staff members of the Senate Church Committee and more than 100 Social Security numbers of staff members of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which investigated the killing of John F. Kennedy. Now, awkwardly for Trump in terms of what he has wrought here, and awkwardly for the rest of us because of the grammar involved, the Post also has to sort of gingerly note that many of these staff members of the Assassinations Committee are themselves still alive. Right? I mean, just because they were on the Assassinations Committee doesn't mean they're not still alive and kicking. And now Donald Trump has ordered all of them to be very thoroughly doxed, which, among other things, appears to be quite illegal. Both the Washington Post and the New York Times spoke with experts who told them that this very well looks illegal. What Trump just did here appears to pretty bluntly violate U.S. privacy law. At least one person who had his or her Social Security number published by Trump has started discussing bringing a lawsuit against the government for having done this. Probably pretty good grounds to do that. It's also helpful to keep in mind who exactly we're talking about here, right? If these people were Senate staff members and House Select Committee staff members in the 1960s and 70s on committees that were doing intelligence investigations and the investigation of the Kennedy assassination and the investigation of the investigation, I mean, people doing that kind of work in government in the 60s and 70s, well, a lot of those people stayed in government or in public service, and that was one step in what turned into a very impressive career in public service, right? A lot of these people ended up later on in their life with very impressive, very important jobs. The people who Trump just doxed include include this list. I mean, this is from the Washington Post again. Quote, many whose Social Security numbers were exposed had become high-ranking officials in Washington. They include a former Assistant Secretary of State, former U.S. Ambassador, researchers in the intelligence world, State Department workers, and prominent lawyers. The Post was first to report that this is what Trump did. The New York Times adds this tonight, quote, White House officials acknowledged today that it was only after the papers were made public that they began combing through them for exposed details. Only after they were made public. So Trump was bumbling around in the halls of the Kennedy Center, being a genius, when he blurted out Monday, apparently with no planning anywhere else in the government, when he just blurted out that the Kennedy assassination records will be released tomorrow. Because he said it, and that's how the government works now, they then released the documents the next day, Tuesday, and then, quote, on Wednesday, the day after that, that's when the White House ordered that the pages be combed for exposed Social Security numbers, which, of course, had already been published by the hundreds. Now, after that ready, fire, aim routine, they're now trying to fix it. The White House has now, quote, directed the Social Security Administration to issue new Social Security numbers to the affected people in an extraordinary response to mitigate the potential harm of the disclosures. They will also be offered free credit monitoring. So, yeah, good luck, ambassadors and assistant secretaries of state and high-end Washington lawyers, including some who worked for Trump. Good luck in your 70s and 80s. Now working with the hugely diminished and unbelievably chaotic Social Security Administration to restart in your 70s and 80s everything in your official and financial life with your brand new Social Security number that Donald Trump is having to issue you today as an old person, as if you were a brand new baby. And he has to do that because Donald Trump just published your full name, your birthday, your place of birth, and your unredacted Social Security number on a government website. Because what? Who's going to tell him no? Who's going to tell him that's not a good idea? And that actually is the most amazing part of all of this, because it does not actually appear to have been a mistake. It's not like they didn't see it coming, and so they were surprised when it happened. Look at this from the Times reporting tonight, quote, administration officials knew before the documents went out that releasing them without redactions would expose some personal information. They knew before the documents went out, but they did it anyway because he's the king. And what, you're going to tell him the genius brain fart he had about Kennedy while he was walking around the Kennedy Center is somehow not the world's greatest and well thought out idea? Who around him is going to be like, sir, It's not how the government works in an autocratic system, right? Asked about the debacle, the White House press secretary gave reporters this statement, quote, President Trump delivered on his promise of maximum transparency. Yes, he did. And the maximum transparency here is like if jeans came in clear and nobody had underwear anymore. Yes, it's maximum transparency. I'm not sure that's good. He definitely delivered. Yeah, and who were you or anyone else to question the inherent genius of every impulsive blurt of the 70-whatever-year-old God King who rules without restraint and without any checks and balances and without anyone anywhere near him who ever suggests the word no, let alone pronounces it? Geniuses.
To meddle in national security and foreign affairs, and he can't do it. What he's done is an intrusion on the president's authority. You know, this one federal judge, again, thinks he can control foreign policy for the entire country, and he cannot. And right now we're evaluating our options.
Okay, so the administration may continue doing these flights?
Absolutely.
Okay, listen, I'm going to say this again.
Okay.
because they keep saying things that they just know aren't true. In 2007, one federal judge stopped George W. Bush's warrantless wiretapping program, the NSA program. You can't get like any deeper into national security in the middle of a war on terror than telling the NSA you can't continue that program. One judge did that. It got appealed. And guess what? He got to continue the program. The same thing happened with Barack Obama, a judge out of Texas on an immigration issue. One federal judge out of Texas stops the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans program. One federal judge out of Texas stopped a Title IX program about gender identity in the Obama administration. One federal judge out of Texas stopped Joe Biden's vaccine mandates for federal contractors. It happens. One federal judge stops president's programs, and it is shocking to me. I will say it is shocking to me. They know this. And you actually have people coming out every day saying things they know are wrong. And I didn't hear them complaining.
Well, in that case, it was the attorney general talking to a judge, just FYI.
And they know this is what happened. Now, listen, if we want to have a debate and you want to go to Congress and say maybe one federal judge shouldn't be able to do this, have the debate and go ahead and have a judicial reform package. Because I know a lot of people think one federal judge shouldn't be able to do that. But that is how our system works, and it is how it has worked for decades.
And that's why it was so significant when Chief Justice John Roberts came out earlier this week and threw a baseball metaphor, a brushback pitch, right, saying, okay, boys, hold off. You know, you're stepping into our territory now. And I think it was a significant development that Roberts was the one.
So Mike Barnicle is still with us, and joining the conversation, we have the host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale, with us. And as you can see, political strategist and former advisor to Senator John McCain and President
Thank
George
God I didn't
W.
wear that
Bush.
this morning, Will.
Mark,
I had the hat on. I said, wait a second.
Good.
McKinnon's coming. No, I'd already put the tie on. I had everything on.
Yeah.
I put the hat on. I go, you know what? McKinnon's coming today. I don't want to be too close.
Don't want to be too. We always risk being matchy-matchy.
We do risk this, yes.
Yeah.
You have half my clothes.
High stakes
so,
right now.
I did not put on my
I almost
spurs.
wore my suit, so.
That is your suit.
Actually, I have a couple more. Oh, good. So, Republican Congresswoman Harriet Hageman in deep red Wyoming faced a rowdy crowd during a town hall last night. Almost 500 constituents packed the room and aired their frustrations, with some of the loudest reaction coming when she spoke about her support for DOJ.
Social Security. The work that I have specifically been doing, I am on the Judiciary Committee and the Natural Resources Committee.
I worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, helping Wyoming family farmers deal with drought until I was fired a month ago in the mass firings, and despite only having the highest marks in my performance review. In a state where so many farmers rely on government programs for drought and disaster relief, Trump's plans to cut these programs and the people who administer them, coupled with the tariffs, will decimate Wyoming farms and rural communities. What are you doing about that?
I disagree. Well aware of what kind of programs are out there. It's so bizarre to me how obsessed you are with federal government. But here's the thing. heart attack if you don't calm down. I'm sorry. Your hysteria is just really over the top.
I can tell you, I held about 100 town hall meetings a year. I never once talked down to my audience. In fact, if they got upset, I got off the stage, I went down, and I sat down, and I started talking to them. You don't do it that way. I will tell you something else that these Republican congressmen and congresswomen are learning. Like the federal government in red state America, for a lot of these people, it ain't way off in Washington, D.C. It's the doctor that takes care of their child. It's the nursing home that protects their parents in their final years of life, because that's funded by Medicaid. That's funded by the federal government. I mean, it's a Social Security check that comes in every month that allows them to continue living their lives the way they deserve to live their lives. And when Elon Musk calls Social Security the greatest Ponzi scheme, I mean, that is somebody that doesn't understand that red state America gets more tax dollars proportionally than blue state America.
This is so significant. As Stephen Stills said, something's happening here. But this time it is really clear. You know, I expect that there might be town halls happening a year from now in maybe Republican districts north of the Mason-Dixon line. But to see that kind of organic eruption in Wyoming, I mean, that wasn't a bunch of Democrats bust into Wyoming, I don't think. I mean, I think that was this is an organic thing happening 57 days in. Those are Republicans, not Democrats.
So, Allie, how much, pressure are these congressmen and women that you talk to on Capitol Hill actually feeling? I mean, when you watch that town hall and you watch the others we've seen, you just see fear on the part of the congressmen and women of Donald Trump and now of Elon Musk. They know if they say something, they're going to get a Truth Social post or a threat from Elon Musk that they're going to be primaried. That's fear, and sometimes explicitly choosing Elon Musk over their constituents.
Well, we were talking about this during the commercial. It's an audience of one, not an audience of the several hundred that are sitting there in front of them voicing valid concerns at these town halls. And I know that Speaker Johnson and other Republicans like to explain this as it's paid protesters, it's people who aren't from here. Our NBC producer who was at that event asked everyone who was there, protesters outside and people inside, are you from here? Are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? They were from all political stripes, but none of them said they were paid. All of them said that they were from that area. It's a small community, they said. They recognize their friends and neighbors there. That's what politics are.
Right.
And even if it's not a constituent that comes from around the corner, if they live in the state, if they live in the district, they are still a constituent. And so Congresswoman Hageman there, who herself, and you were talking about this, was the result of a primary challenge within her own party. Clearly, they're ignoring the concerns of her constituents and, frankly, the concerns of leadership who said, please don't hold town halls like this. The optics are bad. That's why they don't want them being held. But nevertheless, we're seeing them stick to the audience of one and hold the line for Musk and Trump.
You know, Joe, about a month before he died, I called our old pal Al Simpson out in Wyoming, in Cody, Wyoming. Just having a conversation with him about how things were going. And he raised the possibility that all of his neighbors who he knew voted for Donald Trump twice, they voted for him in 2016 and they certainly voted for him last fall, that they would not know what to do when they went down to the local Social Security office, and he said in the spring or the early summer, and the office was no longer there. He said, and then there's going to be hell to pay. Well, hell has already arrived, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, and you know this, Mark. You don't run away. You don't run away from unpopular issues. You run into them. I remember in 1995, we had to slow down the rate of Medicare. Medicare trustees said that it was going bankrupt in 7 years. So we had to slow down the rate of Medicare.
All right.
And Republicans ran away from it. They lost. I think it was one of the only Republicans that ran straight into it. And when somebody tried to demagogue it, I said, this is all I'm going to talk about the entire campaign. And it is all I talked about the entire campaign. And I said, ask me a question about education. I'm going to talk about why we had to slow down the rate of Medicare. Well, you had to cut Medicare to save Medicare. And Mika's heard me say this before. At the end of the campaign, I had Glenn Bolger at public opinion strategy, say we've done 130 districts. I got asked, what did you do with seniors? And I was like, oh, God, why? I said, because you had the highest approval rating by far of anybody, any Republican out of the 100+ we did with seniors. What did you do? I said, I told them the truth. I told them why we had to cut Medicare. And he was like, oh, my God.
Voters can take the truth.
They can take the truth. And these people aren't giving it to them, are they?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, too, Joe, is that, for years, sort of the Republican mantra, particularly as backbenchers, has been government sucks, we're going to shut it down. Government's just unpopular, and so they ran against it. Well, now they've caught the car, and they're shutting down stuff, and 80% of these jobs are not in Washington. They're out in red states. And just as just one example, think about the national parks where they basically cut out all the rangers. Those are the guys that clean the toilets. So wait till everybody goes to the national parks this summer and tries to go to the restaurant.